Toby, a vibrant green parrot with bright, intelligent eyes, was known across the neighborhood for his curious and lively demeanor. Most mornings, passers-by would spot him perched on the shoulder of his elderly owner, Leonard. Leonard was a retired firefighter, a man who had dedicated decades to the service of others, saving lives and braving danger. Now, in the later years of his life, he found comfort in a slower, quieter routine, one that revolved around simple pleasures and the cherished company of his feathered companion. Their bond was evident to anyone who saw them, a mutual understanding forged through years of companionship. Leonard's days were simple, but they held great meaning for him. Each morning, he and Toby embarked on a walk through the neighborhood, following a path that led to the park. The park was a haven for them, a serene expanse where sunlight dappled through the leaves of towering trees, and a chorus of bird calls filled the air. It was spring, and the soft breezes carried the scent of blooming flowers, mingling with the rich earthiness of the grass. The season's warmth was a gentle reminder of the cycle of renewal, a comforting presence in Leonard's life. Today was no different, or so it seemed. Leonard moved with a slight stoop, the years visible in his cautious steps. He wore his usual attire, a light jacket over a faded shirt, sturdy shoes for walking, and a well-worn hat that shielded him from the sun's glare. His face, lined with age, brightened when he encountered neighbors along the way. He greeted each with a kind word or a wave, and people often paused to chat, drawn by his warmth and by the curious antics of Toby, who never missed a chance to preen and show off. The bird fluffed his feathers, tilted his head with interest, and sometimes mimicked the laughter of children who played nearby. For Leonard, these interactions were a balm to the loneliness that sometimes crept into his small apartment, a place filled with mementos of his firefighting days and the memories of loved ones lost. Their destination was a familiar one, a bench beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree. The bench had become something of a fixture in their routine. Leonard would sit there, taking in the sights and sounds of the park, while Toby perched comfortably on his shoulder. Together, they watched joggers pass by, children chasing each other in playful circles, and pigeons gathering to peck at scattered breadcrumbs. Leonard often carried a small bag of seeds, which he sprinkled on the ground for the pigeons, enjoying the way they cooed and fluttered about. These moments, seemingly ordinary, were a source of quiet joy. But today, as Leonard settled onto the bench, something felt different. His breathing was labored, and a faint dizziness clouded his senses. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady himself. Toby, ever observant, shifted slightly, his bright eyes fixed on Leonard. The parrot chirped softly, as if sensing his companion's unease. Leonard attempted to rise, perhaps to shake off the feeling or to seek help, but his strength failed him. He collapsed onto the bench, then slid to the ground. The suddenness of it scattered the pigeons, their wings beating furiously as they fled. Nearby, people reacted quickly. Shouts rang out, and a small crowd gathered. Someone called for an ambulance, their voice taut with urgency. Amidst the chaos, Toby's reaction was swift and startling. The bird hopped from Leonard's shoulder to the ground, positioning himself beside the old man's worn backpack. Toby's wings flared, and he let out a series of sharp, piercing squawks. When a well-meaning stranger approached, hoping to help, Toby's cries grew more intense. He flapped his wings with a ferocity that belied his size, making it clear that no one would come near the backpack without facing his determined wrath. The scene became one of contrasts, emergency responders rushing to tend to Leonard, while others hesitated, unsure how to deal with the fiercely protective parrot. Toby's cries cut through the air, a mix of fear, defiance, and something that could almost be called desperation. He guarded the backpack as if it held a great treasure, his small frame vibrating with tension. People exchanged puzzled glances, murmuring about the unusual sight before them. It wasn't every day that a parrot took on the role of protector, and the intensity of Toby's behavior hinted at a bond that went far beyond that of a typical pet. The paramedics worked quickly, checking Leonard's pulse and preparing him for transport to the hospital. Their movements were efficient, practiced. But they, too, cast wary glances at Toby, whose vigilance never wavered. When one of them stepped too close to the backpack, Toby's feathers ruffled, and his cries grew louder. It was clear that this was more than instinct. It was loyalty and love manifesting in a desperate attempt to defend what mattered most to Leonard. The responders conferred among themselves. They needed to move quickly, but Toby posed a unique challenge. One of them, a young firefighter who had just completed her training, stepped forward. She had heard stories of Leonard, a respected figure in their community, and felt a surge of empathy. She crouched low, maintaining a respectful distance, and spoke softly, hoping to calm the bird. But Toby's eyes remained fixed, his posture rigid. Whatever was in that backpack, it was more than just an object to him. It was a piece of Leonard, a part he couldn't bear to see taken away. As the minutes ticked by, the park fell into a hushed tension. Onlookers watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity, worry, and a strange sort of admiration for the small green bird that refused to yield. What was in the backpack? Why did it matter so much to Toby? These questions hung in the air, unanswered, adding to the sense of urgency and mystery. The spring breeze continued to rustle the leaves, carrying with it the echoes of Toby's cries, a poignant reminder of loyalty and love in their most raw and unguarded form. The paramedics worked swiftly to stabilize Leonard, carefully lifting him onto a stretcher and preparing to transport him to the hospital. Throughout the commotion, Toby remained vigilant. The parrot's cries softened, but did not cease entirely. His gaze never wavered from the backpack, lying at Leonard's side. It was as if the small bird understood the gravity of the moment, sensing that his companion was in trouble and determined to protect whatever remained of him. Spectators watched with hushed fascination, their attention split between the elderly man being carried away and the determined parrot standing guard. As the ambulance doors closed with a soft thud, Toby let out a sharp call, a sound that seemed to echo through the park. The responders paused briefly, acknowledging the intensity of the bond they were witnessing. One of them, Claire, the young firefighter who had taken an interest in the situation earlier, felt a tug of determination. She could not simply leave the parrot alone, confused and protective. She resolved to do what she could to ensure Toby's safety, and perhaps uncover why the bird was so attached to Leonard's belongings. The small crowd around the scene began to disperse, murmuring quietly amongst themselves. But for Claire, the task was just beginning. Approaching Toby cautiously, she lowered herself to the ground, making sure not to appear threatening. Her movements were slow and deliberate. She had learned during her training that animals, especially those under stress, could be unpredictable. Claire spoke in a low, soothing voice, trying to draw Toby's attention away from the backpack without alarming him further. "Toby, it's okay," she murmured, her eyes level with the bird. "Leonard is going to get help. You're safe." The parrot cocked his head, his feathers slightly less flared. For a brief moment, Claire thought she had made progress. But as she extended a hand, Toby's warning cry returned, sharp and unyielding. He flapped his wings and moved closer to the backpack, determined to block any approach. Claire sighed, recognizing that gaining the parrot's trust would not be simple. Her mind wandered back to the few times she had seen Leonard and Toby around the neighborhood. Leonard often stopped by the fire station during his walks, exchanging pleasantries with anyone who had a moment to spare. He was quiet but kind, and his connection with the parrot was always evident. Toby would perch proudly on his shoulder, responding to Leonard's whistles and simple commands with remarkable attentiveness. It was more than a pet-owner relationship. It was a bond built on mutual reliance and affection. Reflecting on these memories, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. She could not let Toby be left behind or dismissed as a mere nuisance. Turning her focus back to the present, Claire rummaged through Leonard's scattered belongings, careful not to provoke Toby. She found a small container of bird treats tucked inside the backpack's outer pocket. Holding one up, she extended her arms slowly, hoping the offering would signal peace. Toby eyed the treat with suspicion, but did not strike. Encouraged, Claire inched closer, speaking in a gentle tone all the while. "I know you miss him," she whispered. "He needs you too." The onlookers, now fewer but still attentive, observed the delicate dance between the woman and the bird. Some snapped photos with their phones, but most simply watched, captivated by the sight of a young firefighter trying to bridge the gap of fear and trust. The scene was raw and poignant, a reminder of the profound connections that exist between humans and animals, even when words fail. Toby's defenses did not drop entirely, but he began to inch closer to Claire, drawn by the familiar scent of the treats and her calming presence. His movements were slow and deliberate, his eyes never leaving her face. Claire felt a flicker of hope. She continued speaking softly, recounting memories of seeing Leonard and Toby together. Her words were simple and kind, laced with genuine empathy. "You've always looked out for him, haven't you? Just like he looked out for you." As minutes passed, Claire began to understand more about Toby's behavior. Parrots, she recalled from an old book she once read, were highly intelligent creatures capable of deep emotional bonds. They were known for their loyalty, their keen perception of human emotions, and their protective instincts. Toby's actions were not just a response to fear. They were an act of love and duty, a reflection of his connection to Leonard. The sky above grew cloudier, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves. Claire felt a drop of rain on her face and glanced upward. The weather was changing, and she needed to act quickly. Toby's willingness to inch closer was progress, but any sudden change could undo it all. She shifted slightly, making sure her movements remained slow and predictable. "It's going to be okay," she said again, her voice steady despite the tension building around them. Just as she reached the edge of the backpack, a loud noise shattered the fragile calm. A car backfired on a nearby street, and Toby's reaction was immediate. He squawked loudly, his wings beating against the ground. The sudden burst of movement sent the backpack skidding a few inches, and Claire instinctively drew back. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone present could see the parrot's distress. Claire closed her eyes briefly, gathering her thoughts. She had one chance to make this right. Taking a deep breath, she opened her eyes and met Toby's gaze. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said firmly. "I'm here to help." Her words were simple, but the sincerity behind them resonated. Toby stopped flapping, his eyes bright with a mix of fear and recognition. The rain began to fall more steadily, creating a gentle patter on the leaves and ground. Claire stood her ground, unmoving, as she tried to project calm and safety. The park, once bustling with activity, now felt like a small, isolated world where trust hung by a fragile thread. Claire knew that every second mattered, not just for Toby, but for the man he so fiercely protected. She was determined to earn that trust, no matter how long it took. With Leonard en route to the hospital, the tension around Toby and the mysterious backpack only intensified. The scene had drawn more onlookers, and whispers spread through the small crowd. Why was this parrot so fiercely protective of a bag? It became the talk of everyone nearby, and the responders debated their next steps. Time was critical. Claire, now soaked by the steady drizzle, remained determined to gain Toby's trust. She crouched again, every movement deliberate, and spoke in a soothing tone, hoping to reach the distressed bird. "Toby, I know it's hard," Claire said softly. Her voice carried over the rain's gentle patter. The parrot's feathers, slick with moisture, drooped slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp and wary. He watched every move Claire made, as if weighing the intentions behind each gesture. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her own nerves. Around her, the world seemed to narrow, the onlookers fading into the periphery. It was just her, the parrot, and the weight of trust hanging in the balance. Memories of Leonard's quiet visits to the fire station floated back to her. He was a man of few words, but he always carried a spark of warmth. Toby, ever perched on his shoulder, was more than a companion. They shared routines, Leonard's gentle whistles, Toby's responsive chirps, and Claire felt a pang of respect for the bond they had built. She understood that Toby wasn't just guarding an object. He was defending a connection, a piece of his world that he couldn't let go of. The rain grew heavier, and Claire's grip on the bird treats tightened. Toby's gaze never wavered, but there was a flicker of recognition when she slowly extended her hand again. "I'm here to help Leonard," she whispered. "You want to help him too, don't you?" Her words were met with silence, but Toby didn't move away. Encouraged, Claire inched closer. Her fingers brushed the edge of the backpack, and she paused, waiting for the parrot's response. Toby's feathers ruffled, but he did not squawk. Instead, he watched her, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that any sudden movement could break the fragile progress they had made. She adjusted her position, making herself as unthreatening as possible. "It's okay," she said again, more to herself than to the bird. The words felt hollow against the weight of the moment, but she clung to them, hoping they would carry some measure of calm. One of the other responders, standing a few feet away, shifted his weight. The noise of his boot against gravel was enough to draw Toby's attention. The parrot let out a sharp squawk, his wings flaring wide. Claire froze, holding her breath. She glanced at the responder, a silent plea for him to stay still. The man nodded, his expression a mix of apology and understanding. Every person around them seemed to hold their breath, the air thick with anticipation. As the rain pooled around them, Claire took another risk. She slowly moved her hand, mimicking a feeding motion Leonard often used. "It's okay, Toby," she repeated. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. "You're not alone." This time, the parrot hesitated, then inched closer. His small, drenched body trembled, but there was a spark of trust, a fragile ember that could be extinguished at any moment. Claire's persistence began to pay off. Toby allowed her to touch the edge of the backpack, though he stayed close. Her fingers felt the worn fabric, damp from the rain. Whatever was inside, it was important to Leonard, and by extension, to Toby. The thought deepened her resolve. She would protect it too. Just as she prepared to lift the bag, a distant siren blared, a fire engine returning from a call. The sudden noise shattered the moment. Toby squawked again, flapping his wings in panic. The backpack slipped from her grasp, and she quickly steadied it, trying to maintain calm. The rain was relentless now, soaking her through. Claire's breath fogged in the cool air as she spoke again. "I'm not giving up," she promised, her words soft but firm. The parrot's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a glimmer of understanding. Toby stepped back, but he did not flee. It was a delicate dance of trust and fear, each movement measured, every word weighted with intent. Around them, the park had transformed. What began as a mild spring day was now a cold, rain-drenched scene. The few remaining onlookers shielded themselves with umbrellas, their interest unwavering despite the weather. Claire felt the weight of their eyes, but focused solely on the parrot. "We'll do this together," she said, inching closer once more. Toby's feathers, soaked and heavy, pressed against his body. He was weary, but he didn't back down. Claire adjusted her approach. She spoke of Leonard, recounting snippets of their shared moments. She described how he would whistle a tune for Toby, how they walked together without fail. Her words carried the weight of sincerity, each one a lifeline thrown across the chasm of fear. Toby's gaze softened, and his movements grew less frantic. For the first time, Claire saw not just a protective animal, but a grieving companion, lost and afraid. The rain continued its steady rhythm, washing away the tension bit by bit. Claire knew they were close. She reached for the backpack again, this time with Toby's silent permission. Her fingers closed around the straps, and she lifted it carefully. Toby did not resist. He stayed close, his eyes never leaving her. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The crowd exhaled in collective relief, sensing the shift. As Claire cradled the damp backpack, she felt the weight of its importance. Toby's loyalty and courage had protected whatever was inside. Now, it was her turn to honor that bond. She gestured for one of the responders to bring a blanket. Toby, exhausted and soaked, perched cautiously on the edge of the backpack, his defenses lowered but not gone. Claire wrapped the blanket around both of them, creating a small shelter from the rain. "You did well," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the downpour. Leonard would be proud. The park fell quiet again, save for the sound of rain. The crisis was not over. Leonard still needed help. But in that moment, a fragile trust had been built. Claire felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She would see this through, for Leonard, for Toby, and for the bond they shared. The rain drummed on, a steady reminder of the challenges yet to come. But for now, they had taken the first step together. The rain continued to pour, soaking everyone in its relentless downpour. Claire, now drenched to the bone, maintained her focus on Toby, the small green parrot whose unwavering loyalty spoke volumes. With Leonard still in critical care at the hospital, every second felt urgent, yet Claire understood the delicacy required to move forward. She adjusted her grip on the damp backpack, ensuring that Toby could see her every move. The parrot's eyes, though tired, remained watchful. A deep tension lingered. One wrong step, and trust could shatter. As Claire shifted slightly to protect Toby from the rain with a blanket, a passerby remarked on how extraordinary it was to see an animal so fiercely protective. The comment, meant to be a simple observation, deepened the weight of the moment. What drove Toby to such lengths? Claire knew that understanding this bond was essential, not just to help the bird, but to honor Leonard's trust. Suddenly, one of the responders approached with cautious steps, holding an umbrella. He spoke in hushed tones, informing Claire that an update had come through. Leonard's condition was serious but stable. A wave of relief washed over her, but it was tempered by the sight of Toby's unrelenting guard. If Leonard pulled through, he would surely want his companion and the mysterious contents of the backpack close by. The thought strengthened her resolve. The rain dripped steadily from the edges of the umbrella as Claire crouched once more. "Toby, it's time to go," she said softly, hoping her words would bridge the gap between them. She extended her arms slowly, not to grab, but to offer comfort. The parrot shifted his weight, feathers still bristling with tension. In his eyes, Claire saw a flicker of recognition, a memory perhaps, of Leonard's reassuring presence. She hoped to channel that memory, even if she could never truly replace it. A gust of wind whipped through the park, rattling the trees and shaking loose droplets that fell like small streams. Toby squawked in alarm, his wings flaring wide. Claire's heart sank. Each moment of progress seemed to be met with a new challenge. She spoke in low, soothing tones, hoping to calm him. "I know you're scared," she murmured, inching closer. "I'm scared too, but we have to help Leonard. Together." The onlookers watched in silence, their faces a mix of sympathy and awe. The scene had shifted from a simple rescue to something more profound, a testament to loyalty, fear, and the fragile threads that bind us. The parrot's trembling eased slightly. Claire saw her chance. She reached out, this time with an open palm. Toby hesitated, then took a small step toward her. His eyes, wary but not hostile, seemed to search for reassurance. Claire whispered words of encouragement, knowing that every sound, every movement mattered. Just as it seemed Toby might accept her presence fully, a sudden commotion erupted at the edge of the park. A group of children, unaware of the delicate scene, ran past, their laughter and shouts slicing through the tense quiet. Toby flinched, his feathers puffing up once more. Claire clenched her jaw, fighting frustration. She couldn't blame the children. They were just being themselves. But the timing was painfully cruel. Determined not to let this setback unravel their fragile trust, Claire redirected Toby's attention. She spoke of Leonard's routines, the morning walks, the quiet conversations, the shared meals. Her voice was steady, painting pictures of comfort and familiarity. Slowly, The parrot's defensive stance softened again. It was a small victory, but it came with a stark realization. Toby was guarding more than the backpack. He was guarding a lifetime of memories. Claire's thoughts turned to the contents of the bag. What was so important that Toby would risk everything to protect it? She needed to know, not out of curiosity, but to honor Leonard's bond. Carefully, she opened the bag just enough to glimpse inside. Her breaths caught. Nestled among the practical items was a well-worn photo album, its cover weathered with age. The sight of it made her chest tighten. This was no ordinary object. It was a collection of Leonard's memories, a link to his past and, by extension, to the bond he shared with Toby. Claire closed the bag, her resolve hardening. She would not let anything happen to it. She rose slowly, cradling the backpack as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Toby remained close, his eyes never leaving her. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt oppressive. Instead, it seemed to wash away the fear and uncertainty, leaving only the raw, unbreakable threads of connection and trust. The park was nearly empty now, save for a few stragglers who lingered under the cover of trees. Claire looked around, taking in the gravity of the moment. She had gained Toby's trust, but there was still one final challenge: ensuring his safe transport to Leonard's side. She spoke softly to the responders, outlining her plan. Toby would not be separated from the bag, and she would accompany them to the hospital. There could be no compromises, not when so much was at stake. As the responders prepared to move, a light flickered in Toby's eyes, a mix of exhaustion and hope. Claire extended her arm once more, this time confident. The parrot stepped forward, his small claws gripping her forearm with surprising strength. Together, they moved, each step a testament to the bond that had been tested and proven true. The rain softened to a drizzle, as if nature itself recognized the significance of their journey. With Toby perched cautiously on her arm and Leonard's precious backpack clutched close, Claire moved with purpose. The responders, respectful of the fragile bond that had been built, formed a protective perimeter as they walked toward the waiting vehicle. Rain had tapered to a drizzle, softening the harsh edges of the tense morning. Toby's claws gripped Claire's arm tightly, a mix of trust and lingering anxiety in his eyes. She spoke quietly to him, maintaining a steady stream of comforting words. The trip to the hospital was quiet. The faint hum of the engine and the rhythmic patter of rain on the windows filled the space. Claire sat beside Toby, mindful of every movement. The bird's gaze never left the backpack, and whenever it shifted, he let out a soft chirp. It was a sound that spoke of vigilance, of a promise to protect what mattered most. Claire's heart ached at the depth of his loyalty. "We're almost there," she whispered, as much for herself as for him. Upon arrival, hospital staff guided them through a side entrance, understanding the delicacy of the situation. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, a sharp contrast to the earthy, rain-soaked park. Toby bristled slightly, but remained calm, sensing the significance of their mission. Claire cradled the backpack carefully, her steps slow and deliberate. They were led to Leonard's room, where monitors beeped softly and the light was dim. Leonard lay still, his breathing shallow but steady. When he opened his eyes, they were heavy with exhaustion, yet recognition sparked when he saw Toby. A tear slid down his cheek as he raised a trembling hand. Claire stepped closer, easing Toby onto the bed's edge. The parrot hopped over, his movements slow and deliberate. He nestled close to Leonard, feathers brushing against his hand. The room seemed to hold its breath. The staff, understanding the weight of the moment, stepped back to give them space. Claire gently placed the backpack within Leonard's reach. He managed to open it, revealing the photo album. His fingers, frail and trembling, traced the worn cover before flipping open. Images of a life well-lived stared back, moments of love, laughter, camaraderie. Leonard's grip tightened, and he turned his gaze to Toby. "We did good, didn't we?" he murmured, voice thin but steady. Claire watched with a mix of pride and humility. She had played a small part in this reunion, but the bond between Leonard and Toby was the true story, a testament to love, loyalty, and resilience. The parrot stayed close, his eyes never leaving Leonard's face. As minutes passed, a calm settled over the room. Whatever the future held, they had this moment, a victory carved from uncertainty and fear. Over the next few days, Leonard's strength returned slowly. He spoke in hushed tones with the hospital staff, sharing snippets of his life with Toby, the stories woven into every picture in that old album. The bond between the two was a source of inspiration, a reminder of what mattered most in life. Claire visited often, bringing treats for Toby and listening to Leonard's tales. She had found a kindred spirit in the man and his extraordinary companion. One afternoon, as the sun broke through lingering clouds, Leonard asked for a walk. The hospital staff arranged for him to be wheeled to the small garden courtyard. Toby perched proudly on his shoulder, just as he always had. Claire walked beside them, offering quiet support. The trio moved slowly, savoring every moment of fresh air and sunlight. The garden was alive with birdsong, and Toby chirped in response, his spirit seemingly lightened. Claire reflected on everything that had transpired. She understood now that courage came in many forms. It was present in the fierce loyalty of a small parrot and the quiet resilience of an aging man. It was found in moments of vulnerability and in the strength it took to trust again. Leonard's story, and by extension Toby's, had touched her deeply. As they paused beneath a blossoming tree, she whispered, "Thank you, Toby." Leonard nodded, as if understanding her unspoken words. "He's more than just a parrot," he said softly. "He's my family." Toby responded with a soft chirp, his eyes bright and watchful. The three stood in companionable silence, the sun warming their skin. Time felt suspended, every breath a gift. Eventually, it was time for Leonard to rest. The walk back was slow, but it was filled with quiet determination. Claire felt a sense of closure and renewal. Life was fragile, but it was these moments of connection, of standing by those who mattered, that gave it meaning. She helped Leonard back to his bed, placing the photo album beside him once more. Toby settled near the pillow, his gaze never wavering. As night fell, Claire prepared to leave. She paused at the door, glancing back one last time. Leonard had drifted into a peaceful sleep, and Toby stood guard, a silent sentinel of love and loyalty. Claire left with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that even in the darkest times, there was light to be found in connection and compassion. The rain had long stopped, but its memory lingered. A reminder of the day a small green parrot showed the world the true meaning of devotion.